I've been doing so much construction work lately that I thought, hell, we need to do some videos on CDM. So I'm going to do a brief introduction into CDM now, what it is, what it does, what it applies to. And then we're going to look at a couple of other things in different videos. So we're going to look at the documentation. We're going to look at the roles. So what's the client's job? What's the principal contractor and all of that stuff. Let's jump into the intro. I'll tell you some more about CDM. What's up peeps, welcome back to Rebranding Safety. Rebranding Safety is a YouTube channel and podcast doing exactly what it says on the tin. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and the bell and all of those button things that look like they do good things for the algorithm. And we're going to talk about CDM today. Like I say, we're going to do a series of videos breaking down all the little bits and bobs of CDM. But before we get into that, RiskFluent is the company behind Rebranding Safety. We provide a number of services: technical health and safety consultancy, transformational, human behavioural, cultural change stuff. We also provide some media services like sponsorship of Rebranding Safety, for example, if you want to increase your brand awareness, or if you want your own Rebranding Safety style video for your company, whether it's your induction, whether it's a motivational safety video, whether it's just some awareness videos, get us in and we can make a cool as shit safety video for your company. If you need any of that, or you just want to have a chit chat, email me, james@riskfluentlimited.com, or go to riskfluentlimited.com. Everything you need to know is there. All the Rebranding Safety stuff is there as well. And don't forget to check out our merch, people. Go to that website, click on Rebranding Safety, you'll see merch. You can buy yourself a safe hoodie, buy yourself one of these caps, look, whatever you need, go and have a look. So, an introduction into CDM. So CDM is the Construction Design Management Regulations. The whole premise of it is to provide some more structure, identify some key roles and key requirements, and introduce some principles, and it does that for the whole construction process. So from pre-construction, so like pre-construction information, then into the design stage with you, the client and your designers, and then the actual build with your contractors, and then also the final handover as well. And documentation is a key part of it, and in fact it's become the overpowering part of it, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. We're going to do another video on what the kind of key documentation is within CDM as well. The objective of CDM is to provide a legal framework that covers the design, the commissioning of work, and its planning and its execution. It applies to all construction work that's likely to pose a significant risk to workers and other parties. So there's something we said there that's really, really important. CDM applies to all construction projects. There's a common misconception that whatever work is notifiable, and we're going to do a video on that, that's what's applied to CDM. No, all construction work. If you're building a new wall in your garden, that is applicable to CDM. There's slightly different stuff for commercial and domestic work, and we'll do a video on that, but ultimately the principles of CDM apply to every single construction job there is. The amount of work within that is proportionate to the job. So it could be as simple as you're a builder doing a domestic job and you detail in your quote or proposal to do the work how you're managing the risk, how you're going to manage the risk to the customer, anyone else that's in the environment, how you're managing the risk for yourself. And that just goes in your proposal, and you might tweak it a little bit because you're coming to site to quote anyway, so that becomes essentially a risk assessment for the job, right? And that would likely be it. You know, the welfare provisions, it's just getting approval in your quote from the customer. You can use their loos, you can get a drink from there, you can have someone to rest there, you go sit in the van. It can be as simple as that, or it can be as massive as a huge building site, and it's really in depth because the risks are really high, or the build is really long, or it could be that it's a small job that's high risk. The amount of work and intensity of your risk management for this should be proportionate to the risk of the job. Now, depending on the size of your project, some of it can become notifiable, as I mentioned earlier. So CDM applies to everything, but there is a bit in CDM that defines when the construction project is so big that it becomes notifiable. E.g., you have to inform the health and safety executive. But we're going to do a video on that, so don't worry about that. So some of the key roles within CDM, I'm going to do a video on each one of these, but let's just list them and give a quick introduction into them on this video. Firstly, the client. The client got a big chunk of responsibility here. They own the property, they own the site, and they start the project. And they need to make sure that everything is done properly. And essentially that is your job as a client. You'll need to provide over all the information, you'll need to make sure that they know what they're doing, you employ the right people. And like I say, we're going to do a video on the client as well. Then you've got the designers. Now you can have designers and principal designers, it depends on the size of your project, but essentially the designers are the people that the architect, they design the work, they carry out the construction phase plan, they plan the process, they design the process and the work. And normally this phase of the project is called the pre-construction phase. So this is the key place to manage your risk. If you're the health and safety person for your organization, for the client, for the principal designer, for whoever, this is the place to be. This is where you are. If you come along at the construction phase, it's normally too late to start designing out any risk. So ultimately, you're stuck midway down the hierarchy of control. So in that pre-construction phase, that design stage of the process, that's where you need to be. Top tip, if you're a fire risk assessor and your company is building a building, then you need to be in at the design stage, because you go and risk assess it afterwards, they've built it, it's going to be a nightmare to try and fix the problem, but you can hit it head on in the design stage. Then we move into the build phase, the construction phase. This is the easy bit, right? The easy bit. This is the bit we all know. These are the builders, and they're called contractors, principal contractors and contractors. On big sites, this can get a little bit messy because you can have the main principal contractor, then you can have main contractors. I've only come across main contractor recently, people going, oh, I'll be a main contractor. So I've always heard of it like this: principal contractors and then contractors. And then normally subcontractors, but essentially the second it goes below that principal contractor, if it's a big project, you have got a lot of companies working together. It is complex. And here is where the normal accident theory comes in for me, right? Tight coupling, everything needs to be built yesterday. We're in a housing crisis in the UK, it needs to get these houses up quick. We can't get them up quick enough. So tight. If one thing fails, it knocks the next thing back, the next thing back, the next thing back. If the brick is slow, the sparky can't come in, whatever, right? It's so tightly coupled and it's complex. All of these different things working together, it's a nightmare. Charles Perrow, normal accident theory means all you need is tight coupling and complexity. And CDM is trying to solve this, it's trying to manage the risk of this, but I feel like it's lost its way a bit because it's become all about the documentation. It's all about the pre-construction information, the PQQs, the ticking of boxes, the generic RAMs. It's become all about, mostly in my opinion, bullshit paperwork. And us as a community, as safety professionals, operational managers have a duty to make sure that it actually has an impact, it actually manages the risk. Construction is still one of the biggest killers in the world, but particularly in the UK as well. So please, take this introduction into CDM so you understand what it is and what it does. And the aim of it is to make it safer, is to reasonably manage the risk. And in fact, the HSE actually give direct advice about this when it comes to CDM documentation. They say that the documentation has to be relevant to the project. I've seen RAMs for the installation of stuff on the top of a warehouse. It was CDM applicable, obviously, because it was a construction project, and I've seen reference to livestock, and I'm like, it's like an industrial estate, there's no livestock around here. It's got to be relevant to the project, peeps. It's got to be proportionate to the complexity and the risks of that project. So like I say, CDM applies to everything, but if you're going to have a huge construction phase plan, loads of pre-construction information, a huge health and safety file, and it's just some dude building some steps in a garden, no wonder people think health and safety's gone mad. But if it's a huge complex project or it's a really risky project, then 100% the documentation should be nigh on the ball. And here's the clanger, right? The HSE make it very clear that your documentation should not get in the way of managing the risk. It needs to be clear on how you're managing the risk, and it needs to have impact. It's not about just creating a piece of the paperwork so you can get on site. It's about managing the risk, and that is what CDM exists for. And if you're doing it for any other reason, then you might as well not do it. And you're just biding your time. You're just playing lucky and hoping that nothing goes wrong. So on that note, there is some really important information that comes from CDM, and there are some clear requirements for documentation. So we've mentioned pre-construction information, and we're going to do a video on the documentation required for CDM. Pre-construction information primarily comes from the client, and it's about the residual risks on site that they need to be aware of. Then we have the construction phase plan. This is the big one. This is how we're going to plan the construction work. This is the design of the site and how we're going to manage it, the risk assessments, method statements, and so on. Then we have the health and safety file. The health and safety file is a handover of the building. It's all the risks and the maintenance and so on and so forth of the stuff in the building and the site. Okay peeps, I hope you found that helpful as a brief introduction and a little bit of a rant about CDM, Construction Design Management Regulations. If you didn't know what it is before and this has helped, great, hit a like button, hit subscribe and all of that stuff. If you need some help with this stuff, come over to riskfluentlimited.com. We would happily help you manage your construction project with impact. Manage it to deliver some confidence, not just compliance. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next week. Safe.